A friend asked me the other day, well, a friend, I mean more than an acquaintance. Actually, it was someone who has worked with me for some time doing workshops and interesting activities, about Michael Chekhov's chapter in the book, The Composition of the Performance. And we had a conversation about that relating not just to acting, but to life itself. This, you could say, the journey of the individual, the journey of the hero or the heroine, and that's the journey of the individual, and how that is so important to understand that those basic archetypes, those basic principles, the universality of these things, and how you can then apply them to where you are in your life, on your life's journey. So let's just look at this journey and see what we can learn about it and how we can apply that into our own work as an individual actor and as a director, because the director has the whole play, like the conductor of an orchestra, whereas the individual players of an orchestra have their own particular roles and their own particular journeys within that big overarching journey of a work of art. So I would suggest read in Chekhov's To the Actor the chapter called Composition of Performance, because he goes into a great deal about it. But I'd like to just look at it from an easier point of view, actually. And that's the point of view of not just concepts or thoughts about different laws or principles and naming them and considering them, but to be able to sense the movement within it. One of the best ways of doing that, and it's connected to one of Chekhov's, well, not only Chekhov, this sense of how a work of art must have the principle of a beginning, a middle, and an end. I mean, I'm sure you know, you've seen plays, you've seen films where you think it was a great beginning, but then it didn't really go anywhere. And similarly, the end is reached far too soon, maybe, and you think, it didn't lead to something. I didn't feel that the conclusion or the end came about satisfactorily. And what you're doing when you're doing that, you're developing the sense of what it means to be an artist, to have this sense of, we call it aesthetics, that sense of the underlying, sensing the underlying principles within one's work. And by reading great literature as well, seeing great paintings, originals, not prints, and hearing music, not amplification on CD, but real live, you begin to learn and sense this. It's very intuitive. There's another element to it that's not just analytical. Of course, then, if we can analyze it and talk about laws and principles and so on. Also, it's related to a sense of the entirety. You know, one of the four brothers, the sense of the whole or the sense of entirety. There's a beginning, it must go somewhere, there must be a climax, a high climax, or a low climax, a height and a depth, and then everything must bring it to a conclusion where you have a sense of the reason why you've gone through all of that. Otherwise, it's just merely entertainment. To begin with, let's look at, well, beginning, middle, and end. Let's start at the very beginning. And that very beginning, of course, has an archetype to it, a reality to it. And that is birth. Something begins. Something starts. It wasn't there before. And then it starts. Let's look at the middle, that the maturity, the the sort of the end of the beginning, you could say, the middle is, and the beginning of the end. So the middle is like a metamorphosis from one thing to the other. We could also say what happens at the end. The lights come on, the curtain falls, whatever way something ends, people stop playing the music. You leave the art gallery, the painting is still there, that goes on, but your relationship with it has changed. So that we know that there's before the beginning something, we call it the preparation, we call it the in-breath, we call it the changeover from one thing to the other. It's not just any longer the mechanical thing of giving and receiving, or starting and stopping, or the interval in music from one note to the next. So you could say that if you're looking at the play as a director, you would be looking at all those things that went before. I don't necessarily mean the biography of the individual characters or about the biography of the playwright, but where it's placed, what went before it, the geography, the beginning of the play, what it's born into. Like all of us are born into a family, a nation, a language, a sex. That's where it begins, that location, you could say. You know, in GPS, there's always a little blue dot where you are. That's your location. And you navigate from that point, most important, from the center, not from the periphery. And at the end, what's the resonance like a note in music? It resounds. It keeps continuing on. And you could say, in the audience, after the performance, friends may want to have a meal after the performance and talk about the play. And even great performances, I guess you could, looking back on my theatre going, there's 3 or 4, actually, where it's resonated for a long, long time after. That play has really touched you, whether an individual character, whether the theme of the play, it's touched you deeply and it keeps on resounding. So the composition of a performance is not only the highs, the lows, it's much more than that. For the director, it would be interesting to attempt, not that you're going to compose anything, but can you put it in musical terms? Does it start off slow and move slowly, like a big river swirling? Does it start off in a very small sort of staccato sort of way? How does it start? What musical instruments would you use? When would the main orchestra swell up to a climax and then descend into the depths? I mean, look at Tchaikovsky's symphony. I think it's the 6th one, where there's the great heights and great depths, and the depths are just as important as the heights. That movement through from one to the other. You could actually not only do it musically, you could also dance that music. That's one way of looking at it. Of course, you need to have your artistic thinking here, but then take it into another form. Take it into that music, into dance, even drawing it with great swirling circles or straight lines on a piece of paper. And I'm just thinking, about the bird behind us making that extraordinary sound, as if he's got something caught in his throat. You see, that's a part of this whole morning that we're here, and that is an element that you would actually give an instrument to, or a dance movement to. So it's not only the beginning, the middle, and the end. What has gone before. Composition, how something is composed, how it's created, how it comes about, and all the laws that Chekhov talks about and the principles in that chapter. Composition of performance has to be brought out now and understood through experience, and that means movement, through dance, through listening to music, identifying a piece of music where that element, the great heights, the great depths, the journeying forward that's relentless, that it keeps going on and on and on and on and doesn't stop. Those moments when it pulls back and seems to be still, when nothing is happening. The most difficult of all is to navigate those slow movements so it becomes not boring, but full of potential possibilities. So we're bringing our analytical understanding onto another level. That's most important. Otherwise, the tendency is to try and push that understanding analytically onto the audience by telling them through performance or color or lighting or set what they should be experiencing. Whereas in fact, it's all movement, just as life is all movement. And that's the journey, that's the composition. You see it in your own life, and you see it in all the great works of art, and you'll be able to distinguish when it's not a well-written play or a film that's not done properly, because it doesn't have those elements brought into a whole. So at the end of it, you're not only satisfied, but you've connected and felt the workings within all of life, outside and inside you, of these great universal principles, the great composition, you could say, of all of creation.